This is the second excerpt from James Joyce's Clay. When the cook told her everything was ready, she went into the women's room and began to pull the big bell. In a few minutes the women began to come in by twos and threes, wiping their steaming hands in their petticoats and pulling down the sleeves of their blouses over their red steaming arms. They settled down before their huge mugs, which the cook and the dummy filled up with hot tea, already mixed with milk and sugar in huge tin cans. Maria superintended the distribution of the barmbrack and saw that every woman got her 4 slices. There was a great deal of laughing and joking during the meal. Lizzie Fleming said Maria was sure to get the ring, and though Fleming had said that for so many Hallow Eves, Maria had to laugh and say she didn't want any ring or man either, and when she laughed, her gray-green eyes sparkled with disappointed shyness, and the tip of her nose nearly met the tip of her chin. Then Ginger Mooney lifted up her mug of tea and proposed Maria's health, while all the other women clattered with their mugs on the table and said she was sorry she hadn't a sup of porter to drink it in. And Maria laughed again till the tip of her nose nearly met the tip of her chin, and till her minute body nearly shook itself asunder, because she knew that Mooney meant well, though, of course, she held the notions of a common woman. But wasn't Maria glad when the women had finished their tea, and the cook and the dummy had begun to clear away the tea things? She went into her little bedroom, and remembering that the next morning was a Mass morning, changed the hand of the alarm from 7 to 6. Then she shook off her working skirt and her house boots, and laid her best skirt out on the bed and her tiny dress boots beside the foot of the bed. She changed her blouse, too. As she stood before the mirror, she thought of how she used to dress for Mass on Sunday morning when she was a little girl, and she looked with quaint affection at the diminutive body which she had so often adorned. In spite of its years, she found it a nice, tidy little body. When she got outside, the streets were shining with rain, and she was glad of her old brown rain cloak. The tram was full, and she had to sit on the little stool at the end of the car, facing all the people, with her toes barely touching the floor. She arranged in her mind all she was going to do, and thought how much better it was to be independent and to have your own money in your pocket, and she hoped they would have a nice evening. She was sure they would, but he could not help thinking what a pity it was that Alfie and Joe were not speaking. They were always falling out now, but when they were boys together they used to be the best of friends. But such was life. She got out of her tram at the pillar and ferreted her way quickly among the crowds. She went into Downs' cake shop, but the shop was so full of people that it was a long time before she could get herself attended to. She bought a dozen of mixed petty cakes, and at last came out of the shop laden with a big bag. Then she thought, what else would she buy? She wanted to buy something really nice. They would be sure to have plenty of apples and nuts. It was hard to know what to buy, and all she could think of was cake. She decided to buy some plum cake, but Downs' plum cake had not enough almond icing on the top of it, so she went over to the shop in Henry Street. Here she was a long time in suiting herself, and the stylish young lady behind the counter, who was evidently a little annoyed by her, asked her was it wedding cake she wanted to buy. That had made Maria blush and smile at the young lady, but the young lady took it all very seriously, and finally cut a thick slice of plum cake, parceled it up, and said, 2 and 4, please. She thought she would have to stand in the Drumcondra tram because none of the young men seemed to notice her, but an elderly gentleman made room for her. He was a stout gentleman, and he wore a brown hard hat. He had a square red face and a grayish mustache. Maria thought he was a colonel-looking gentleman, and she reflected how much more polite he was than the young men who simply stared straight before them. The gentleman began to chat with her about Hallow Eve and the rainy weather. He supposed the bag was full of good things for the little ones, and said it was only right that the youngsters should enjoy themselves while they were young. Maria agreed with him and favored him with demure nods and hems. He was very nice with her, and when she was getting out at Canal Bridge, she thanked him and bowed, and he bowed to her and raised his hat and smiled agreeably. And while she was going up along the terrace, bending her tiny head under the rain, she thought how easy it was to know a gentleman even when he has a drop taken. Everybody said, "Oh, here's Maria." When she came to Joe's house, Joe was there, having come home from business, and all the children had their Sunday dresses on. There were 2 big girls in from next door, and games were going on. Maria gave the bag of cakes to the eldest boy, Alfie, to divide, and Mrs. Donnelly said it was too good of her to bring such a big bag of cakes, and made all the children say, "Thanks, Maria."